Columbus was a Wetiko. He was mentally ill or insane, the carrier of a terribly contagious psychological disease, the Wetiko Psychosis. The native people he described were sane people with a healthy state of mind. Sanity or healthy normality among humans and other living creatures involves a respect for other forms of life and other individuals. I believe that is the way people have lived and should live. The Wetiko Psychosis and the problems it creates have inspired many resistance movements and efforts at reform or revolution. Unfortunately, most of these efforts have failed because they have never diagnosed the Wetiko as an insane person whose disease is extremely contagious. So you have all these mainstream religions, you have the political scene, you have the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex. These are all manifestations of what the indigenous people were already calling the Wetiko virus and how it's loosely translated into evil of today. This is a sickness. This is a psycho-spiritual virus. It's a psycho-spiritual disease. What I'm saying is that in order to hide the reality that this psycho-spiritual virus is existing inside of everybody, it has to create another consciousness for people to believe in that makes it seem benevolent. So you have the creation of the university system. In the benevolent scene, it's pawning itself off as developing the intelligence. But we already know, and saying that it's the evolutionary peak of reality, but we already know. We already know that the evolution theory is made up. We know that the Big Bang theory is made up. Gravity theory, relativity theory, heliocentrism theory. These are all theories that are made up. You have to see that that's the ultimate evil. It's the ultimate evil when the system itself has created a sense of benevolence in the hearts of minds and people in order to maintain its existence in your psycho-spiritual consciousness. Since the indigenous people were aware of this and had a name for it, the Wetiko virus had to, in order for it to survive, it had to develop another system, another consciousness, this synthetic consciousness that creates a mimic version of what the indigenous people were talking about, but includes a distraction that also includes the Hegelian dialectic. So you have the distraction of Satan, you have the distraction of the most evil villain, you have the distraction of the Bible, the mainstream religions, and you also have the faith within those mainstream religions, which is just a generated system that was designed to hide the ultimate evil that actually created these half-ass, completely hollowed out. This is why the Bible is so, you feel a sense of uncertainty about it. This is how I feel. Yes, obviously there's good things in there, but there's some horrible shit in the Bible. And that goes with all of these mainstream religions. And if it was coming from the essence of the Most High, there wouldn't be that insecurity there. There wouldn't be that uncertainty there. It would be an ultimate truth. It's kind of like love. You don't have an uncertain sort of feel about it. It just overtakes you. There's something you can't explain it. Like even the word love is just so shallow and weak. So when people just accept something like the mainstream Christian faith in the Bible and just say that's it, that's the word of God, you're automatic, and then don't at all entertain what the indigenous people and the people that predate these mainstream religions, they don't even go into what that is. When that happens, I have some serious questions. This is where I'm at right now, and I've been for the last few years. It's like, well, I already know that the indigenous people of this land, there's a reason why their belief systems, their spirituality, their cosmology has been hidden. There's a reason why. And when you go into the reasons why, you start to uncover many of their interpretations of this reality that expose the reality that we are subjected to today. So when that is known, then you have to also piece together, wait a second. If this is existing this way, and these people were exposing the actions of this so-called new world, this so-called Western civilization, well, what else were they really aware of? So to stay focused for this video, I wanted to just share the observation of the indigenous, specifically the Native Americans. What they explained was the manifestation of evil, because the commercial version, the mainstream version of evil, is interpreted through the eyes and the filters of mainstream religions, local news, politics, the university system, and whatever nonsense that comes from that whole Western mindset. And if we don't go into, if we're basing our beliefs and our observations of this reality on the system that created the problems in the first place, then you are doing nothing but balling yourself up into a ball of confusion that has been prepositioned for you to fall within. The same way that people actually think that they are fighting evil when they vote Democrat against Republican. You can go all the way, expand that all the way out to the maximum scale into the Western so-called civilization. Zoom all the way out. And it's easy to see when you have people like Alex Jones who are constantly going into this superhero type of mentality that's based upon 1776 and the patriotic sort of Americana reality. He's nothing but a public a history book for the public education system. And what makes him more valid in people's eyes is the fact that he talks about some fringe information in the conspiracy theory. They just created a villain within the villain. That's what Alex Jones represents. InfoWars represents the villain creating another villain within the villain storyline, so that you don't actually see the system itself as the ultimate evil. That's what Alex Jones represents. That's what even the New Age represents. When it creates, instead of creating a villain within the villain program, the New Age program has developed a superhero within the villain program. It also generates all these other villains within the villainous program. Because when you're not addressing the system of Wetiko, the virus itself, the psychospiritual virus, and you're just, accepting, oh, we should just get better, be one with humanity, be this, oh, take over with 1776, we're gonna beat you, globalists. You see that they are still inhabiting that psychospiritual program because they're not going to the depths. They're just creating another prescription drug to deal with the situation and never go into the cancer, the disease, the virus itself. Once the Wetiko virus figured out a system of how to go live through people, it had to develop a new form of cosmology. So here comes the heliocentric program. It had to develop a new form of religion. So here enter in the Jesuits and the Columbic, or the Christian and Catholic faith that could be seen as like a spiritual attack on North and South America and eventually the entire world. But to focus on what happened, in order for something to manifest in the psyche, it has to first manifest in your spiritual body. So it goes from the spiritual body to the psychological body and then the physical body. The indigenous people were aware of the balances of nature. They were aware of, they were dancing it out. They were shown, this is what these Hopi dances were about. This is what these indigenous dances and ceremonies were about across the earth. They were about keeping the stories alive so you do not become subject to something like the Wetiko virus, because as long as you're aware of it, it's not going to be able to lock its tentacles into your reality and eventually suck the life out of you to where you're just a hollowed out version of yourself. You're not even yourself anymore. You've been shrunken down to the 0.00001% of you, which is totally insecure, unsure of yourself, don't know anything. You don't know what the soul is. You don't know what the humanity is. You don't know what earth is. You don't know your relationship to the balances of nature. You don't know any of this stuff. The mainstream reality is just based upon worshiping Western civilization, worshiping NASA, worshiping politics, worshiping technology, worshiping all of these things that are a manifestation of the original Wetiko virus, the original idea of the new world. When Columbus came over to the Americas, and then all these people came over, they made an agreement with the Wetiko virus to not look at the humanity, to not expose the inhumanity of the actions of the Columbian era, of the Western so-called civilization, of manifest destiny. They signed a spiritual contract with the Wetiko virus. Today, the people who are just constantly protecting and defending this Western so-called civilization, they are the manifestations of the Wetiko virus. Anybody can activate this evil. Anybody can be subjected to the Wetiko virus. But the people who are consciously accepting this inhumane universe, this inhumane so-called civilization, you are a manifestation of the ultimate evil. And the ultimate evil isn't going to manifest in a dark suit with all these weapons and all this. I mean, you could go into the fact that that's actually what the America or the United States represents. That's how, but inside each person, in the person, in order for the Wetiko virus to manifest itself, it has to remain hidden. So the spiritual Hegelian dialectic was developed with these mainstream religions, and that is also designed to hide the origination, the true evil, which is beyond those mainstream religions. So your spiritual interpretations of this reality are locked down by the mainstream religions and those belief systems, those Hegelian dialectics that get created within those programs. The psychological Wetiko manifestation comes in the form of Columbus calling the indigenous people across the earth in this storyline in the Americas, calling them primitive and savage. And they just need to be given this freedom. They need to be given the freedom of the new world, of manifest destiny, of Western so-called civilization. So you have them priding themselves against the evil that was you. You were evil if you were an indigenous person and you had a connection with the earth and everything else. You were the evil, and they made themselves out to be the superhero. This is what opened up the door. So that's the psycho and the spiritual. This is what opened up the door inside the individual people, the Europeans and everybody else who came over here to suck the land, suck the life at the expense of the indigenous people. It opened up the door for them to think that they were benevolent when they arrived into the Americas. They thought that they were doing something good, where in fact the system itself was consistently genociding, poisoning, and destroying the natural connections that people were inhabiting just by their very existence. What they were doing for hundreds, thousands, and you could possibly go into hundreds of thousands of years, or even longer than that. So this is how the doorway opened within the individuals to allow the Wetiko virus to come in. And since the Wetiko virus was accepting, since the people were accepting the inhumane actions of this evil system and thinking that it was benevolent, that is what set up the platform for the physical, the total dominance of the entire earth plane reality. So it went from the spiritual with religions, it went to the psychological, with the demonizing of the ancestors, the demonizing of the indigenous people. And now it has activated in the actual physical reality as total dominance across the earth plane. And it's allowed to exist in there because there are enough people who have opened themselves up to accepting this Western civilization that is largely inhumane and taken to the umpteenth degree is the manifestation of the ultimate evil. So when you have all of these things that are in the way of people realizing that it's the ultimate evil, like Christianity, the Jesus program, the New Age program, the Bible, when you have all that, it creates this insecurity, and this insecurity exists inside the individual that will keep them from going any further, because the only thing that they have to pride themselves in is what the virus itself gave to them. The virus came over here with Columbus and gave the indigenous people the Bible, gave them that idea of religion. And now it's just accepted as that is the superhero, because the Wetiko has taken over. It's taken over the people. So it's the ultimate evil that's taken over. This is the actual reason why everything in this human society is inhumane. It's because the people themselves over generations upon generations have been separated from their original interpretation. We forgot the stories. The stories have been overtaken by new stories. They've been replaced by new realities. This is what Donald Trump represents. This is what his old Make America Great Again, the university system, Alex Jones. This is what this Western civilization represents. And the people who are accepting large chunks of this society, the society's belief systems, are actually doing more harm than the system itself. Because you are setting up the anchor point for the system to continue to grow. So what the Western society has done is it's created a new world for you to live in, thinking that it's benevolent, thinking that it's ultimate goodness, but actually inhabiting a space that is a manifestation of the ultimate evil. When you accept the new age, new world version of intellect and spirituality, you are accepting the nature of the Wetiko virus. And until you dispel that from your reality, you're still going to be playing checkers and not realizing the 3-tiered chess game of your soul, your mind, and your body. So these are the levels of evil exist on each one. And the people who are playing checkers, they're just locked into that space and don't even know. They ultimately don't even care, because their consciousness isn't vibrant enough. It's been shrunk down so much. Your humanity has been shrunk down into the 0.0001% of reality so much that you don't even know what empathy is. You don't know what compassion is. You don't know what humanity is. You don't know what culture and connection is. The actual systems like transhumanism and simulation theory and all this stuff can be inserted into you, and then you can now become a robot. So now they can enter in like a CD-ROM drive inside your body, and then now you go out to Best Buy and you buy the Wetiko software, and then you put it inside your hard drive, inside your CD-ROM in your body, and now you have all of this you have Google inside your head now, and now you think that you're the smartest, most evolved monkey in the universe, and that is the ultimate manifestation of the Wetiko virus maintaining itself as God over you. They were and are kings over you right now, kings and queens with Hollywood and politics and all this other stuff. When the Wetiko manifests within people who claim to be kings and queens, look at the Queen of England, look at Donald Trump, look at all these people who are just benefiting, who are just loving this genocidal system, this colonial consciousness. They just love it. That is the psychological manifestation of the Wetiko. That is where they become kings and queens. In order to become gods over you, they have to install a new relationship to your spirit, to your reality. This is what heliocentrism was. This is what the mainstream religions are. And this new version of it is transhumanism and this interdimensional quantum interpretation of reality, string theory, simulation theory. This is just a new religion, basically a scientism religion, to make you go further and further into emptying yourself out. And why it's emptying you out is because the more empty that you are, the more space is available inside your reality for the Wetiko to take over. That's what the indigenous people were saying when they were saying Columbus was pretty much a manifestation of the Wetiko virus. And now you have entire populations, cultures, people who are thinking the pop culture mainstream reality, that is the cultural manifestation of the Wetiko virus. Psychoanalysis. The origin of Wetiko is the human psyche. Psychologically speaking, shadow projection is at the very root of Wetiko disease. Shadow projection is a process in which we split off from and project out our own darkness onto others. This is what's happened when Columbus said that the indigenous people were primitive and savage and they should be slaughtered. That was the beginning of that. It is our misguided attempt at a final solution to the problem of the evil within ourselves, which actually deprives us of the capacity to deal with the evil. So it keeps us from going into the depths of seeing what it actually is. It has to remain hidden. Projecting the shadow opens the door and invites in the vampiric entity of Wetiko to make itself at home in the most intimate spaces of our own psyche. It is through the dynamic of shadow projection that the Wetiko bug digs in and entrenches itself within our psyches, where it is then able to commandeer the executive function of the psyche to its own ends. When we project the shadow, we unwittingly become a conduit for evil to possess us from behind, beneath our conscious awareness, and to act itself out through us. This is what's happening within individuals in the American dream and the New World Order, the New Age reality, the Western so-called civilization, the colonialism, and all that. All of that is designed. That is the way it's being acted out. Through us, and even more through individuals walking around in their suit and ties or walking around like they're thugs with weapons. You're just loving this system. When there is mutual shadow projection between individuals, groups, or nations, each side has an unconscious investment in the other playing out the projected evil, so as to prove their own self-righteous innocence, a dynamic which becomes self-reinforcing and continually feeds the polarization in the field. Shadow projection, as it collectively plays out en masse on the world stage, is an outer reflection of the initial process within ourselves of our benighted effort to exterminate our own darkness. When shadow projection happens en masse, it is as if the archetype of evil emits its toxic radioactivity underground through the shared unconscious of the collective and manifests collectively as destructive psychic epidemics. In shadow projection, we attempt to master and experience our power over the internal condition that originally proclaimed our powerlessness to ourselves, not by becoming conscious, but by unconsciously identifying with, becoming, and then acting out the power to externally destroy. This is where the physical manifestation of this comes, where the entire Western civilization tells you it's spreading freedom, but it's actually spreading evil. It's spreading the Wetiko virus. Unconsciously acting out unbound power without restraint is our perverse way of defending against the internal breakthrough of feelings of helplessness. Evacuating and relocating our inner darkness outside of ourselves by demonizing the other seemingly protects us from feeling our vulnerability and pain. This is what I said with the relationship between Columbus, what Columbus told the world about the indigenous people. Our inner anxiety about our existential power to be attempts to resolve itself in the power to act free from restraint. In an unmediated expression of our disempowered inner condition, our unconscious acting out does not surmount the need for compulsive repetition, however, but rather assures it. Wetiko's modus operandi, their MO, becomes to root out and kill everything that feels tender, vulnerable, and alive within themselves, thus systematically murdering anything and everything within them that could possibly melt or produce a crack in the ice that encases their heart. Because full-blown Wetikos are soul murderers who continually recreate the ongoing process of killing their own soul, they are reflexively compelled to do this to others. For what the soul does to itself, it can't help but do to others. In a perverse inversion of the golden rule, instead of treating others how they would like to be treated, Wetikos do unto others what it was done to them. The Wetiko is simply a living link in a timeless vampiric lineage of abuse. Full-blown Wetikos induce a dream up others to experience what it is like to be in the part of themselves which they have split off from and denied, and are thus not able to consciously experience the part of themselves that has been abused and vampirized. In playing this out, Wetikos are transmitting and transferring their own depraved state of inner deadness to others in a perverse form of trying to deal with their own suffering. Paradoxically, Wetikos both try to destroy others' light as it reminds them of what they've killed in themselves, while simultaneously trying to appropriate the light for themselves. Wetiko disease is an expression of the convincing illusion of the separate self gone wild, bewitched by the intrinsic projective tendencies of their own mind. Full-blown Wetikos are unconsciously doing the very thing they are reacting to and accusing other people of doing. This is the war on terrorism. The war on terrorism is terrorism. Projecting the shadow onto others, they will accuse others of projecting the shadow onto them. To use an extreme but prototypical example, it is like someone screaming that you're killing them as they kill you. If their insanity is reflected back to them, they think it is the mirror that is insane. Suffering from a form of psychic blindness that believes itself to be sightedness, full-blown Wetikos project out their own unconscious blindness and imagine that others, instead of themselves, are the ones who are not seeing. Governed by the insane, self-perpetuating logic of fear and paranoia, those taken over by the disease, they fear that if they don't attack and rule over others, they are in danger of being attacked and ruled over themselves. In their convoluted, upside-down, flawless, illogic, Wetikos react to their own projections in the world as if they objectively exist and are other than themselves, thinking that they themselves have nothing to do with creating that to which they are reacting. Someone fully taken over by Wetiko bug is like a kitten endlessly reacting to her reflection in the mirror as if it's another kitten separate from and other than herself. The evil we see in the full-blown Wetikos is a reflection of our own evil. If we don't recognize this, we will just be projecting our shadow onto them. We are then guilty of the very same thing, shadow projecting, we are essentially reacting to and of which we are accusing them. The term Wetiko is a Cree term, Wendigo on Ojibwe and Wetiko in Powhatan, which, to quote Forbes, refers to an evil person or spirit who terrorizes other creatures by means of terrible evil acts. Wetikos are the human instruments for transpersonal spirit of evil to terrorize the world. Terrorize the world. In Wetiko disease, we unwittingly become drafted into being foot soldiers in the war, not on, but of and for terror. The Wetiko parasite feeds on and harvests the emotions of fear and terror. Terror is the essence of insidious, illusory illogic. In the Wetiko disease, the psyche takes the terror that haunts it from within, and it, in an attempt to master it, unwittingly becomes taken over by it, thus becoming an instrument of terror in the world. We have then become the thing we most feared, creatures of the European nightmare world, as we psychologically terrorize ourselves as well as terrorizing the world at large. Wetiko is the bug which feeds the experience of terror within our mind and out in the world, fueling one of its more prominent manifestations in our world today, the global war on terror.